mutual funds, and in this particular section we're going to kind of spend some time looking specifically at debt funds and what are the parameters that are important. So far most of the funds that we have looked at are equity funds. Now we're going to turn our attention towards debt funds and probably look at examples of debt funds and understand what are the key parameters that are typically there within debt funds, right? So for debt funds, we need to revisit a few of the earlier criteria that we've already kind of studied. The credit rating of the underlying bonds, tenure of the underlying bonds, and duration of the underlying bonds become important parameters while selecting debt fund. What is credit rating? Credit rating is basically going to tell us about the riskiness of the bond. Tenure is the time to maturity, and time to maturity is useful in terms of explaining what kind of risks the fund has in terms of the amount of time it will take before it returns your money. And duration is basically a measure of interest rate risk, right? Also typically used, the parameter used is called as modified duration, and these are three of the more important parameters that are there for the fund. So effectively, when we are looking at a debt fund, these three parameters assume paramount importance when we are evaluating a debt fund, right? Now, what is the risk in the bonds underlying the portfolio is going to be given by the credit rating. What is the average tenure of the bonds underlying the rating is going to be underlying the portfolio is going to be given as the tenure, and what is the interest rate sensitivity is going to be given as duration. Remember, if the duration of a fund is 2 years, it's typically denoted in year terms, then a 1% change in interest rates will mean a 2% change in price in the opposite direction, right? So plus 1% would mean minus 2%, and minus 1% would mean a plus 2% increase in price, right? So that's what duration does. And tenure is basically the time till which the bond will last, right? Let's take an example and understand a debt fund slightly better. So for an example perspective, we're going to use a fund called Reliance Regular Savings Fund, debt fund. And we're going to study some of the data points that are available from the fact sheet that Reliance issues. So this is a fund that has a monthly AUM average of about 6,800 crores, a fairly big fund in terms of data. There is some sort of, so the fund manager is Mr. Prashant Pimple. There are a few important parameters that become very, very relevant for us when we are looking at the debt funds, right? So the first thing that we have to look at is what kind of return the fund is giving, what is the duration, and what is the broad maturity, right? So let's look at those parameters. What we see here is that the return expected from the fund, or average YTM of the fund, is 9.69%, right? What do we mean by YTM? YTM basically means that if you have the weighted average maturity of the fund is 2 years, so if you hold it to maturity, which is 2 years effectively, and the fund doesn't really change its bonds during this period, then you expect a return of 9.69%. If the fund does not change its portfolio from now on till the maturity, and you hold all the bonds and the fund till the maturity of all the bonds, and the fund manager also does the same, you will probably end up with a 9.69% return. There could be changes, obviously, because the fund manager may choose to, let's say, sell this and buy this, and some of those kind of things might happen, which changes the portfolio and changes the weighted average maturity as well. Typically, your weighted average maturity, which is 2 years, is useful from the perspective of your calculation of the data, that if your investment horizon, typically what you want to do is your investment horizon, how long do you want this to be invested, should be equivalent to the weighted average maturity. Usually this thumb rule makes risk lesser in terms of it tries to match the investment with the tenure of the fund requirement that you have. We also see modified duration is 1.63 years. So modified duration is equals to 1.63 years. What does this mean? For a plus minus 1% change in interest rate. There will be a minus plus 1.63%